Hello and welcome to Newswire. I'm Ayza, Omar. Now, the China-Pakistan Economic Corridor has been making headlines for several reasons. We'll be exploring all of that and also highlighting the regional benefits of CPEC, as it's called in short, for not just China, but Pakistan and other countries in the neighborhood. Now, this, of course, came into being in 2013 when President Xi announced CPEC, the flagship project, part of the multi-trillion-dollar project of One Road, One Belt initiative that is taking place here in Pakistan. And as the development takes place and projects are underway, some of them are completed, of course, there's a lot of speculation, criticism that is going around. But to dispel some of those myths and also to highlight what kind of benefits we are talking about, we will be speaking to an esteemed panel of guests. For that, I would like to begin the show by welcoming the Deputy Chief Mission of the Chinese Embassy here in Islamabad. Welcome to the show, Mr. Zhao Lijian. It's so good to have you here to talk about these projects, but also we would like to welcome one more guest. We've had him here before, and once again I'd like to welcome you, Mr. Einar Tangen, commentate on these issues. You are you are the economic affairs commentator and also an expert on political and economic affairs related to China. So let me start with you, Mr. Zhao. We're talking about, of course, a lot of speculation on CPEC, but before we get into that, let me also start with asking you, what are the benefits to China on establishing such a huge project here in Pakistan?
Yeah, I think, China-Pakistan Economic Corridor is a flagship project of the Belt and Road Initiative, which was proposed by President Xi Jinping back in 2013. CPEC has made a lot of progress, which has benefited not only China but Pakistan. We tried to help Pakistan to solve two problems facing the economic development of Pakistan. One is, the lack of infrastructure. The other one is the load shedding issue. In terms of infrastructure development, under CPEC, we have, helped Pakistan to build this motorway, especially from Multan to Sakar. And this project, in terms of amount of investment, it is the largest one under CPEC, and also it provided more than 23,000 jobs to the local people. It is the largest project, one of the largest projects under the BRI-2. Another big infrastructure project is this upgradation of PKH, Karakoram Highway, from Tarkod to Havilian. These two projects and other infrastructure projects have helped Pakistan to improve its infrastructure. Another sector we tried to help Pakistan to solve this issue of load shedding. If you recall, 6 years ago, Pakistan had a load shedding. In Islamabad is about 8 hours every day. So nowadays, in big cities, the load shedding has dropped almost to zero. So this is also this not only benefited the people, it also benefited the big industries, the factories, the pumps.
Absolutely, the power project it comes under CPEC has contributed significantly. In fact, the output of to the national grid, it contributes about 11% of the total output. That is a significant amount. But also to highlight, besides the economic and infrastructure benefits that Pakistan will obviously face, can we talk a little more about the economic benefits to China? What is the crucial position that Pakistan holds in terms of making it a candidate and a successful candidate as a flagship project of the One Belt, One Road initiative?
Yeah, for the trade routes, of course, but this is it takes much longer time. China is mainly, using the sea route to conduct the trade. But for Xinjiang, for the, inland, far-flung areas, maybe they can use Pakistan, to engage in trade with, for example, in the Gulf countries, the Middle East, with African countries. But we need to first of all to build, the better highway between China and Pakistan, and in future we have a plan to build a railway. Until that time, we can, of course, use this CPEC as a trade corridor at that time. But at present, we need to, focus on building better road and railway, and it can be done at a later stage.
Right, and are there any concerns with China about Pakistan's obviously a fragile economic situation at times? The government has changed. It is gearing ahead to revamp its financial structure, its economic structure, but obviously there are concerns about the foreign reserves here. So there are talks about a restructuring of how the loan will be made, or whether it will be a concessional loan or an aid package. If you could highlight a little bit about that and give some clarity on how debt repayment is going to take place in the future. Do we have any could you expand on that for us?
I think the Pakistani government is trying to do its own homework. For China, for every country, you have to experience this kind of stage of economic development. When your economy developed too fast, and then you have this shortage of foreign reserve, shortage of U.S. dollar, and this is only a temporary phenomenon. And we believe that with the help from China, from other friendly countries, Pakistan government can fix this issue very quickly.
Right. Thank you so much, Mr. Zhou. It was great having you on Newswire. And while we're still talking about projects and what kind of projects and the benefits to Pakistan and China, and of course the other regional stakeholders here, let's welcome our third guest, which is Mr. Hassan Daud. But he's the project director and also the coordinator of the CPEC projects. Welcome to the show, Mr. Hassan. Let me start off by asking you a little about these projects. 11 of them have been completed, and I believe 20 more are underway. If you could talk a little more about, in terms of power and infrastructure, where do we stand on the CPEC projects?
Right now, about 15 energy projects are in various stages of implementation. About 7 have already completed, and the total volume is around $22 billion of the projects that are under implementation. And the total projects are about 28, and in which around total volume is $28 billion. And they are in various stages, and they include, if you talk about energy, they include projects on imported coal, they include projects on thermal coal, hydel projects, renewable. And I just want to highlight that the government is focused on from imported sources of energy to renewables, and also to use indigenous sources of sources for energy like thermal coal and also hydel and renewables. So in that respect, all our projects are going as per timeline, and there are no major issues. As far as infrastructure projects are concerned, there are two major projects. One is the Multan-Sakkar motorway, and also we have one that connects to KKH. And both of the projects are going 6 months ahead of schedule. So we have no problem as far as CPEC. But I just want to use this opportunity to inform that after the present government took over, they have expanded the scope of CPEC in socio-economic development, agriculture, and also with complete thrust on the industrial cooperation phase, because the government believes that by attracting FDI in special economic zone and
okay,
other areas of industrial cooperation.
Right, Mr. Hassan, let's get back to that thought of the projects that have changed strategy a little bit, including socio-economic issues in agriculture. Let me come back to you, but here, let me come to you, Mr. Ayza. We're talking about, again, there is a significant amount of money invested here. This is a multi-trillion-dollar project, the One Road, One Belt initiative, obviously. Pakistan is the flagship project. The benefits to China in terms of route, how much of a financial benefit does China face when it takes a route through Pakistan as opposed to the South China Sea, if we are to look at it from an economic perspective?
Well, unfortunately, you can't look at it just from economics, because what you have here is a situation where China is being blocked on its sea routes, or potentially blocked. Just the other day or yesterday, the U.S. was sailing warships through areas that are disputed in the South China Seas. And there is a fear that China, which depends on bringing resources in and then adding value and trading them out, could be blockaded. So the Belt and Road Initiative was really there to make sure that there was a back door. And that's where the real advantage is. It's literally a lifeline to an alternate route so that China cannot be fully blocked. Now, in terms of how that works long term, obviously China is doing very well. They have a huge market. If, in fact, this corridor is created, it creates for Pakistan a route not only to Europe, but also to the East. And as a result, it'll encourage economic stability. And you've seen that, you've heard today, both guests have been talking about that. And the advantage of that really is the social and political and military stability that could offer. From the Chinese point of view, they believe that if you have a prosperous, hopeful population, that they will, of course, support the government, that you will have less terrorism, less separatism, all of these types of issues. So China's game is a long-run game. Now remember, these numbers are huge. It started off 42 billion, it's now at 64 billion. But the return on those is not really going to be there until there's this point where all of the pieces fit together. If I offered you one piece of an engine and said, what is it worth? You'd say nothing. Right. But when all of the pieces of the engine are put together, yes, there is going to be
But when you refer to one of the pieces, like all the pieces being put together, you're referring obviously to the larger picture of the One Road, One Belt initiative, right? Or is it just related to CPEC's projects here in Pakistan?
Well, CPEC was the initial project, and it was hoped that this would go along a little bit smoother. I don't want to contradict my colleagues, but there have been some rough patches in there, and there probably will continue to be. The issue is how you go about resolving them. Obviously, there are alternate routes. Both Russia and India have on again, off again. I think Russia is a little bit more friendly towards the Belt and Road Initiative. Right. India seems to be going back and forth.
Due to the lack of time, I'm just going to, rush you through that. There were security concerns, obviously, and a lot of other issues, but just trying to try to paint a picture here. We're looking at, if we're looking at the One Belt, One Road initiative, and we're looking at the route through Pakistan, there are some estimates from reports that it generates an annual savings of $2 billion to China when they take a route which is about over 12,000 kilometers shorter from the other options available. So it's obviously got a very huge economic benefit to China as well.
Well, yes, except it's connecting up to the western areas, which China is trying to develop, but which have not really reached the point where they're going to be generating a lot of trade. It does not make sense to send things from the very developed eastern seaside of China through that particular route. It does save time when you're using rail and road, but there is an additional cost. So hopefully that will come down a little bit, but sea trade will always be less expensive.
Less expensive. But and very quickly, criticisms that we hear from the West, especially in the light of what is happening with US and China in their trade war, as they're trying to come to some kind of conclusion to sort out matters before tariffs are doubled again. How do you see the US's criticism towards CPEC?
The U.S. Does not want China to continue its rise. It's made that very clear both on the technology and trade side. the U.S. sees China as an economic rival, and rather than competing against it, it seems to be more intent on tripping it up. So, yeah, opposing any kind of Chinese expansion is in the game plan. I don't think you'd find many people in Washington who would privately not admit that. But it will be remain to seen whether the U.S. can successfully do that. The world seems to be dividing quite clearly between those.
The world seems to be dividing, and the U.S. continues to criticize China on as they compete head-to-head, neck-to-neck on global dominance economically, at least. Thank you so much, Mr. Ayza, for your contribution there. Here, as we talk more about U.S.-China relations and, of course, how U.S. reflects on Pakistan's involvement so deeply entrenched in the CPEC project, let's pull in our new guest here, who's Mr. Syed Mustafa Haider. Welcome to the show. You're the Executive Director of Pak-China Institute. You're joining us from Islamabad. If you were to comment a little, obviously, such a huge investment wouldn't take place unless relationship between the two countries were at a point where there was not just confidence building measures, but a history of able to work together. Do you see it that way, or do you believe we've still got a long way to go in evolving as a strategic partner to China?
You see, Pakistan and China have enjoyed what we call an all-weather partnership, an all-weather brotherhood since the beginning of our diplomatic relationship, when the People's Republic of China was established. And it was a very close people-to-people relationship, strategic relationship, and defense relationship. And now that historic relationship has translated and progressed into one of the most important economic partnerships in the world. As the earlier speaker said, that it is the flagship project of the Mammoth Belt and Road Initiative. So I think that confidence, trust, and faith in each other and standing by each other's core interests is the platform for the China-Pakistan economic corridor. And I think that because it's such a unique relationship which has stood the test of time and is not linked to any one political party, any one government, but it is between the people of both countries, and it's a state-to-state relationship.
Let's talk more about how other regional players are looking at it and criticizing it. For that, I'd like to welcome Mr. Zamir Ahmed Awani. He's a sinologist with NUST. Welcome to the show, Mr. Zamir. India has criticized very vocally, has come out and said that this project is a threat to its territories, that China is not playing fair, and has shown quite a few concerns at various international forums. How do you see India's criticism on CPEC continuing to evolve with projects in Pakistan?
In fact, rise of China is not accepted by the Western world, and they were trying to halt or curtail China. And CPEC being one of the flagship project, there is a resistance not only from India, from many other countries. Let me focus only on India. India is a traditional rival of Pakistan. Since independence, they have not accepted Pakistan, and they were always trying to harm Pakistan. CPEC is a message of prosperity, peace, and stability, improvement of the infrastructure, connectivity, industrialization, and now it has entered into the agriculture and the social sector too. So India is not going to digest anything good for the Pakistan. Indian government has allocated around $500 million US dollar fund to the RA to sabotage CPEC, and they are trying their best to sabotage. So sometimes we are under threat from Indian agencies, especially the Chinese nationals. Chinese
Mr. Zamir, sorry, please hold that thought. We have to take a short commercial break here. Let's back and talk more about what the threat is to India and how it sees these projects evolving. Right now, we have to take a quick short break. We'll be right back. Welcome back to Newswire, talking with an esteemed panel of experts around the world, commenting on how the world is looking at the China-Pakistan economic corridor. And for that, who better to comment on this than the Pakistani ambassador to China, Mr. Masood Khalid. Welcome to Newswire. Let's get your take on how the community development is underway in China, where you're situated. Can you talk a little more in terms of Pak-China relations and how CPEC is seen amongst the community members there?
Well, first of all, let me start by saying that CPEC, as you know, is a pilot project or a flagship project of the Belt and Road Initiative for President Xi Jinping, which was launched in 2013. So in the past few years since its launch, BRI, or the Belt and Road Initiative, has emerged as the what I would describe as the most popular public good and the biggest cooperation platform of the 21st century. And since its commencement, I think more than 60 countries have concluded over 150 agreements and MOUs to promote project-based cooperation. Mm-hmm. So CPEC is part of this BRI initiative of China, and we have covered considerable ground since it was launched in full earnest, I would say, in 2015. We have a number of projects which have been completed in different sectors, for example, energy, infrastructure, port development, and more are in the pipeline. So as far as the international community is concerned, of course, the majority of the countries which are now associated with the Belt and Road Initiative are supporting this initiative. And CPEC is seen as a game changer, as a catalyst for Pakistan's socio-economic development.
It's definitely economically, sorry to cut you here, it's definitely economically very beneficial to Pakistan as well as to China. But if we were to just reflect on some of the concerns that were floated earlier as this arrangement, this project has been evolving, there were a lot of security concerns. And we're talking about to the tune of 70,000, I believe, Chinese workers in Pakistan in the span of past 2 years. And there were some serious security concerns. Do you feel that Pakistan has stepped up in providing the kind of security that the Chinese government was demanding for their workers here?
Well, objectively speaking, I think the security situation in Pakistan has improved a lot, substantially in the last 4 or 5 years. Mm-hmm. And things are changed for better. And in fact, we are no longer obsessed with security as such, in the sense that we are now looking at CPEC from a development paradigm. The focus is now what CPEC is offering in terms of socio-economic development of Pakistan, mm-hmm. and it has also attracted the international attention. You see more investors and business corporations from other countries are now interested in Pakistan's market. So there is a change in terms of
I want to also ask you about. I also want to ask you about the sentiment in China. Of there are a lot of private business company owners, construction companies who are getting opportunities to work here in Pakistan. Now, obviously, this is great for them as well economically. But if you were to talk about the general sentiment amongst the people in China, what would you say? Is there an excitement? Is that feeling of friendship not just amongst the leadership but also dissipated amongst the communities? Would you say?
You see, Pakistan-China relationship goes deep down at the grassroots level. One has to understand that CPEC predates, China-Pakistan economic cooperation. Mm-hmm. China assisted Pakistan economically way back in 60s and 70s. So some of the signature projects of Pakistan have the Chinese support. Mm-hmm. So CPEC in fact has added a new dimension to our economic cooperation. And you touched on the security aspect. I think fortunately there has not been any serious security incident involving Chinese nationals in Pakistan, except for this last, attack on the Karachi consulate. But luckily, no Chinese lost his life. And Pakistan government has also taken elaborate measures. We have made elaborate arrangements to provide security to our Chinese friends. Now, there is great interest in the business community of China here, where I am, from my vantage point, when I meet corporations and business conglomerates and the small and medium enterprises, they are looking towards the next phase of CPEC, which is the development and establishment of special economic zones, which is the fourth cluster of CPEC. And the government of Pakistan is now planning to launch these economic zones. We hope that 3 zones will be launched in the first phase this year. And that has, a great deal of appeal here. Small and medium enterprises are willing to come and explore Pakistan's vast market potential. Mm-hmm. So I think there is great hope and great potential.
All right, thank you so much, Mr. Khalid, for joining us here on Newswire, giving us a snapshot of how the Chinese community is also seeing the development of CPEC projects in Pakistan. Obviously, trade will see a huge boost for both countries. It benefits them enormously economically. But we're not just operating alone. We're in a community, in a global community where superpowers are really competing for economic dominance over the markets. And right now, US doesn't seem to be very happy, especially considering that it's neck to neck on the highest number of goods exported annually. So for that, I just want to come back to you, Mr. Hassan Daud. When we talk about CPEC projects, we're obviously talking about billions of dollars of investments here. Now, Pakistan is in itself also trying to reach out to IMF for a bailout package. When this kind of a situation is developing, we are, of course, concerned with US not being happy with our relationship with China. Do you feel that maybe they could influence in any way the IMF's conditions on a future bailout package to us?
Since I'm not part of the discussion on IMF, but I can only relate to some of the dots that would connect us to the economic development of that we're looking at through CPEC. As His Excellency the Ambassador said, the Pakistan-China relationship is deep-rooted. And now that it has this economic dimension from a strategic perspective, it has now become an economic partnership.
Let me restructure the question a little. I'm sorry, Mr. Hassan, sorry to interrupt you. Let me restructure it. What I was trying to get to was that obviously, if the IMF, we do go ahead with the bailout package with the IMF, and it is influenced by the US, which would be of no surprise, and conditions are affected, wouldn't that put us in a difficult position in terms of what kind of projects we can work with on China? There are concerns by some analysts that we would have to possibly scale back, because US is very concerned that their taxpayers' money doesn't go in repaying debts to China. But what I'm trying to ask you is, are we looking at any possible projects that could be scaled back as a result of the criticism we are getting from our other allies?
No, for you to understand and for your audience to understand, you need to know the projects that are going to take place in next phase. So mostly it's about industrial cooperation in agriculture sector and in socio-economic. So in those projects, say for example, if you're talking about industrial cooperation, the projects would mostly be on B2B basis. So when you have B2B basis, then you're not asking for big loans or any loan that would support or that could affect the balance of payment structure. And now coming to socio-economic, in that case also it's about poverty alleviation, and most of the projects there, as we speak, are in grant, and the cooperation that we are seeking and looking at, and their experts are coming on 24th, would also be in similar structure where you would have grant projects coming in. Lastly, about agriculture supports our economic growth, and also the cooperation there is also about expert to expert level interaction, also looking at some of the technology transfer. So in the next phase, we do not see any project that would that would actually be would impact the balance of payment structure. Now coming over to the energy projects that would be taken from 2019 till 2030, those are all in IPP mode. So that again
so
would not
IPP
impact
mode
the
is
balance.
basically
so
they're in the pipeline and
I
they're
do not
developing.
think by any means.
Right. So
no, they are the
right. Sorry to cut you here. Let me pull in Mr. Saeed Mustafa. We were speaking to you. So let me pull you into this conversation as we're trying to highlight what kind of threats that CPEC could face from international communities. But we do want to reflect more on how China and Pakistan has evolved together with their historical relationship and how they're going to take on the criticisms that are coming from major stakeholders here. I mean, we're talking about India constantly criticizing this project as it evolves. How do you see Pakistan-China's ties evolving as a result of these criticisms?
I think that the Pakistan-China ties are going to evolve very successfully in the future because they are very key projects that are in store for us, including but not limited to special economic zones, which I think are the most important for Pakistan because those are what are going to increase our exports and our manufacturing and relocate industries from China into Pakistan, giving FDI to Pakistan, and also setting up major factories which will have market access not only for China but also other neighboring countries from Pakistan, because the cost of production in Pakistan is more cost effective than in China, and also because special economic zones are a key part of CPEC, particularly one's SEZ located in Rashakai, which is in KP, and the other in M3 in Faisalabad, and then there's Dhabeji in Sindh. So all the provinces are getting a share, and this is what Pakistan has been waiting for a very long time when we talk about a balance of trade and a balance of payments and our foreign exchange reserves. I think the special economic zones are the answer to all of these problems. And as far as India is concerned, it reminds me when Mangla Dam was built through World Bank financing and multilateral financial institutions financing in AJK in Azad Jammu Kashmir, there was not a squeak from India. But when China Three Gorges invested hydropower projects in Karot and Kohala, which are huge, successful hydropower projects, then all of a sudden investment in that area became controversial. So I think there's an evident double standard, and the problem is not about anything but containing the rise of China, the peaceful rise of China, which is a source of stability for Pakistan. And I also want to say, it's very important to note that the Belt and Road Initiative is a very inclusive project, not against any one country. And in fact, one of the corridors of BRI is the BCIM, the Bangladesh, China, India, Myanmar corridor. So it's a very inclusive project, and all countries have welcomed and supported this project. The only country which is sulking in a corner is India. And I think that it is important that bilateral commerce and trade and commerce and connectivity should continue regardless of any differences, and we should ask and encourage India to become part of this. And it's a win-win for Pakistan, China, and all other countries concerned.
So, Mr. Hassan, now the importance of Gwadar obviously has a big sort of role to play for not just Pakistan and China. The China Overseas Ports Holding Company has already allegedly invested $250 million in the port renovation. Could you highlight some of the key features that Gwadar provides as a port to Pakistan and China?
You know, first of all, as the project director, I would just like to highlight the progress that we have made thus far as Gwadar is concerned. So in that we have done the phase 1 of the port as well as of the free trade area, and we have entered phase 2. We are also working on East Bay Expressway, which is a 6-lane corridor connecting directly to the coastal highway. And besides that, this year we're going to start the Gwadar Airport, which is the new Gwadar Airport, which is a grant project. And also 2 other important projects. One is the vocational training center. It's a state-of-the-art vocational training center that will also, the groundbreaking is scheduled this year. And lastly, the 300-bed hospital. We already have a 50-bed hospital, and that would be
the development that is taking place in Gwadar.
300 bed.
I'm so sorry. If we were to translate the development that is taking place other in terms of how many million tons of cargo is going out now and how much of that will improve, could we put a number on it or have some kind of analysis to get an idea how large scale this renovation of the Gwadar port is?
You see, at this time, it's difficult to put a number to it. Why? Because it will depend on the connectivity to the corridor and also the trade volume that takes place. But I just want to highlight the two important aspects of Gwadar. One is that we are almost in the final stage of finalizing the Gwadar Port Master Plan, which will take it to 2050. And also, concurrently, we are working on the Gwadar Smart Port City Master Plan. So talk about Gwadar City, because that would eventually be our industrial hub, and that would also take a shape of a transshipment hub based on the operationability of the port. So now from a 3-berth and port, it is being in the long-term plan till 2050. We will work on at least 50 berth, and the depth of the berth would be it would be the deepest port in the region. While we work on this, we are also working on city status to be a free zone altogether, so that investment can flow into Gwadar, and you're already seeing a lot of activities investment-wise taking place in Gwadar. So as the port develops, the city itself is being developed as a modern. And what we are doing is that we are working on Shenzhen and Hong Kong's model, and taking best practices from there and trying to implement those in Gwadar. So I believe that by 2050, not only the commercial activity on port, but also within the city as a free
will be
port
fully underway, and that will
inshallah.
definitely boost the economy of Pakistan, providing so many jobs. Now, as CPEC is underway, Mr. Zamir, there are certain reports that come out with a number of 1.2 million jobs that will be created overall as a result of this project. Now, this obviously translates really well for the economy, but also for the community in general. We're seeing a lot of amalgamation of the Chinese community here in Pakistan. How do you foresee this up to 2030, as we're expecting this project to culminate by then, reflecting on the not just the economy but the community also for both countries?
Definitely, CPEC will have a lot of impact on our social system. There will be new projects, and there will be more jobs for Pakistanis. In the beginning, of course, the Chinese, they have to bring their own workforce, because they do not find suitable workforce in Pakistan. But gradually we are training our people, and our government has given high importance to the vocational trainings, and there are programs on job trainings, and the Chinese government is also helping out Pakistan to train the required human resource. Definitely it is a huge opportunity for Pakistani youth to find new jobs. There are estimates of around 1.5 million new jobs will be created by 2030. Definitely it will bring a big change in the Pakistani society.
Kiran, I just want to highlight one small thing here. While we're working on the maritime sector, I spoke about the port, we are also working on development of a blue economy, because that is one area that was not given the due importance in past. And now we trying to include coastal tourism, blue economy at large as part of the CPEC. And during the 8th JCC, which was recently held in Beijing, we spoke about extending this cooperation in the maritime sector from a port perspective to the overall blue economy. So when that takes shape, and you have coastal tourism, because we have these virgin beaches available and a beautiful coastline stretch from the Balochistan all the way to Sindh, that provides us a lot of opportunities. And we also believe that if we extend it to the tourism sector, there are a lot of opportunities of jobs there. And even the study on job market, even through those SCZs, we believe that by 2025, we should be able to generate at least 500,000 jobs from these SCZs, 9 SCZs, based on their population and based on how the joint ventures would go ahead.
And since we're just running out of time, Mr. Mustafa, I'm coming back to you. We've highlighted quite a lot of criticisms coming from regional powers. We're talking about US's concerns also. But Pakistan and China's independence, independent of the CPEC project, has historically always had very strong military, economic, financial, diplomatic ties. And do you see these continuing as it is with the CPEC project, also reflecting on how they will affect other issues that are in the region that concern China, specifically if one is to talk about Afghanistan? This obviously will also benefit somewhat from CPEC. What is your take on this?
Yes, CPEC is certainly giving rise to a greater South Asia, as we call it, and Afghanistan and all other neighboring countries, I think, will be a beneficiary. And we already have the Wakhan corridor with Afghanistan. So there's certainly a win-win relationship and a win-win partnership when it comes to not only Pakistan and China, but also regional countries, which is why they are supporting Pakistan and want to become a part of CPEC. And as you know, Saudi Arabia is investing a huge oil refinery in Gwadar as we speak. I think that the military relationship that you speak of and the people-to-people relationship that you mentioned will, I think, continue to strengthen. Because when you talk of Belt and Road Initiative, it is very important to mention that it's not only about energy and infrastructure. While that is an important component, now, as Mr. Hassan Daud mentioned, tourism is part of the long-term plan of CPEC. Cultural connectivity is part of the long-term plan of CPEC. Increasing people-to-people exchanges with youth and delegations is a part of the long-term plan of CPEC. So it's basically reviving the old Silk Road, and the old Silk Road included commerce, trading of goods, but also cultures and a fusion of different ideas and ideas and religions and traditions. So it's a very broad and
it
grand
goes well beyond
concept.
the economic and social side of it. Well, thank you so much, Mr. Mustafa, for your input there, and thank you to the rest of our guests, Mr. Zamir, Mr. Hassan. The China-Pakistan Economic Corridor, the projects that are continuing, 11 are completed, 20 are underway, a multi-billion-dollar project underway in Pakistan, not just benefiting Pakistan financially, culturally, and economically, but also China and other regional stakeholders. As the news develops, you can always tune in to Newswire for updates on not just this story, but more regional issues surrounding our country. And with that, we've come to the end of the show. Till next time, goodbye.